Sound the alarms? Folks, an Arctic blast is on the way! We're talking multiple waves of bone-chilling cold air absolutely barreling towards us, and guess what? Snow chances are exploding across huge parts of the country. The next 2 weeks are going to be absolute chaos in the weather pattern as we head into December. You absolutely need to see this forecast. Hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, you are seriously missing out on these critical weather updates. Go ahead and smash that like button, and feel free to drop any prayer requests you have in the comments below. Now, let's dive into the shocking predictions coming straight from the Climate Prediction Center. Please, drop those in the comments below. Alright, let's get this show on the road this morning. We're starting with the latest from the Climate Prediction Center. We're going to talk about temperatures first, then we will cover any kind of winter weather second, and after that, we'll take a much deeper dive into December. Alright, check this out. This is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook straight from the Climate Prediction Center, the actual experts. This map covers from the 26th through the 30th, right around that Thanksgiving time frame as we head into next week. So, if you live in this blue area, that is where they're forecasting below average temperatures. Now, if you look at the warmer colors, like the orange and even some red popping up, this is where they're leaning towards above average temperatures during this period. You'll notice a good chunk of the northern Rockies, just about the entire middle of the country, and a large section of the eastern United States are in that zone. They're all trending towards below average or near normal temperatures. Now, you can see the southeast is the exception, holding on to those above average temps. But watch what happens when we extend this out to the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, which takes us from the 28th through the 4th of December. Now we're getting into December, and a huge part of the country is highlighted. They're saying there should be below average temperatures, or at least a strong chance for them. Meanwhile, the southeast is just hanging on for dear life with that stubborn southeast ridge, and we'll talk more about that as we get deeper into the video. But the main takeaway is, a large area of the country is looking chilly. They are forecasting a chance of below average temperatures. Now, I want to show you this next map really quickly. We won't stay on it for long. This is the week 3 to 4 temperature outlook, but keep in mind, this was issued a full week ago. A brand new one will be released this afternoon, and honestly, I am on the edge of my seat waiting to see what the new one shows. This one will extend from December 5th through about the 19th of December. The one you see now covers the 29th to the 12th, because, as I said, it was issued a week ago. But that next one, covering the 5th through the 19th of December, is so important because it extends past the model guidance I'm about to show you. So, the big question is, are they going to show a signal for knocking back this ridge? I really hope they do because, of course, we don't want to waste a big chunk of December with above average temperatures in the southeast. Am I right? Unless you're a huge fan of warm weather and couldn't care less about colder holiday temperatures or winter weather chances. But I know I definitely care. So, I am definitely rooting for a colder holiday period. It just makes everything feel more festive, right? But let's go on and see what the models are saying to back all this up. We're looking at the European Artificial Intelligence Ensemble. We're going to start this off with next Wednesday, the 26th. The warmer colors you see on your screen, like these, represent above average temperatures. And then the cooler colors, like the blue and some areas of green that will show up, mean below average temperatures. So just think warm versus cold compared to the average for this time of year. And this is starting off on Thanksgiving Eve. So it looks like we are going to be dealing with a cold front sweeping across the country. The model guidance is pretty much locked into this. This is cold front number 1. We have been talking about this like crazy over the last week, and the European Artificial Intelligence model has been definitely locked in on this and really hasn't wavered since. Other model runs have now come around to it too. So it now looks like Thanksgiving Day should be quite chilly across areas of the central to eastern United States, as a cold front will quite literally be making its way through this area on Thanksgiving Eve and into Thanksgiving Day. So we might have a chilly Thanksgiving. Now, across areas of the eastern United States, if we go back about a week, we weren't thinking that was going to be the case. It certainly looks like it's going to be the case now, and you can see this area in green showing anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees below average. So, a chilly 28th of November, and as we start to get into the weekend, the last weekend in November, we're still hanging on to below average temperatures across the eastern United States. But you do see a bit of a moderation as we start to get to around near normal. If we kind of combine both the below and above average temperatures in this area, you'll see it. But then you see a huge signal for a lot of cold air as we get into the last day of November, dropping down across the middle of the country. And I think what we're seeing in the higher latitudes and things like that really supports this well. There is a lot of blocking up there, We know we've been talking about the warming in the polar region, which could dislodge some really cold air, and I think this backs that up. A big Arctic frontal boundary looks like it will drop down across the middle of the country with a lot of Arctic air to follow. And this is anywhere from 15, 20, maybe as much as 25 degrees below average. So I think we're going to have some deep Arctic air that really drops down late next week into the last weekend of November. Now, in response to such a deep diving trough down into the western and central United States, this is going to flex the ridge. It's almost like when you're jumping on a trampoline, right? You jump in the middle of it, and the sides of it kind of go up as you jump in. That's kind of what the atmosphere is doing. A big trough is diving down right in the middle of the country, and this is going to cause the southeast ridge to flex. So, we get the cold front late next week, but it immediately warms up right as we kickstart December. So we start to see above average temperatures dominating the eastern United States, and I mean, it gets really warm, guys. This creates a big temperature gradient somewhere in the Midwest, I mean the south-central United States. Well below average temperatures across the middle of the country will clash with well above average temperatures across the eastern United States. And you know, as we start to get a few days into December, the question is, does that cold air begin to bleed east and beat down that ridge? I think it does. And as we get all the way to the last panel here, you can see that happening. You know, cold air starts to overspread the northeast again, and some changes begin to occur. So we just have to watch this. And you know, if we do look at something like one operational run from the European Artificial Intelligence model here, and we're going to start this off with, this is Tuesday, November the 26th, and you're going to see this is that first cold front, right? I'm using a new site that I really like here. You know, so we're going to have an opportunity here for some below freezing temperatures. You know, this is the morning of, heck, I think this is getting into Thanksgiving Eve and Thanksgiving, so it's going to be a chilly day. What day is that? I'm having a brain fart here. So, you know, Thanksgiving is, what is it, the 28th here? No, wait, let me get my dates right. My brain is farting a little bit there. But this is getting into Friday morning. You can see some really chilly temperatures spreading across the eastern United States. But you know, nothing too crazy. I mean, this is, in my opinion, just an average late November cold front. But as we continue to move forward, I think it'll be a chilly weekend, that last weekend of November, and then you see a lot of cold air drop down across the middle of the country. You know, this is getting into the 30th, this is getting into December 1st, and for example, I mean, this is the morning of December 1st, and look at these below zero temperatures dropping down across the Rockies. There's just one sign of what's to come, operational run, but look at this crazy temperature gradient down here into Texas. I mean, we're into the single digits, into the panhandle of Texas, and into the 70 seconds in the morning time of December, first along the Texas coastline. So, you know, a bunch of cold air drops south, but then the southeast ridge begins to flex, and you can see how we get warmer than average temperatures quite literally can see. The southeast ridge based off these temperatures here, so very cold air. I mean, this is getting into the morning of the 3rd. This is really far out, but it really fits what we're seeing in the upper wind pattern pretty well. A lot of cold air diving down. Across the middle of the country now, you know, any kind of storm systems are really watching for, and I'm not super focused on this that much. Because model guidance is really everywhere on this. But if we started off, you know, as we're getting into Thanksgiving week, you know, this is Tuesday. We do got a storm system sweeping across the areas of the eastern US. I think this will mostly be rain. I do want to watch a stronger piece of northern stream energy, 998 millibar low, some snow on the colder side. How much of that cold side would there be? Not sure. But, you know, this is getting into the 26th, right? You know, this is getting into Thanksgiving at this point, and we do have cold air making its way through, but no significant storm systems. But I do want to watch this storm system up here if you live up here in the upper Midwest. Yeah, the upper Great Lakes region, you know, day or two before Thanksgiving want to watch for that system. But not a well-phased system or anything like that. And then, you know, we start to get into the 28th, and then we get into the 29th, and this is when that Arctic boundary could begin to drop down a lot of Arctic air associated with it. We have some moisture associated with it. So, you know, we get about a week or 8 days from now, and here comes that Arctic boundary dropping down, and the Euro AI model really likes the idea of a lot of moisture associated with, and this is getting into, you know, the 30th. First, you know, we don't want to get too hyper-focused on the actual day, but man shows a wild setup, and normally we get these Arctic boundaries, and we get even just a touch of moisture associated with it can cause chaos. So if we do get any moisture associated with this Arctic front, we're going to get a crazy widespread winter storm to kickstart December or right to end November. But this is all rain. Across areas, heck, maybe we even get some thunderstorms across the southeast, and we get into the second, we get into the third, and this is getting really too far out to really matter. And we do look at the Euro model here, the same thing. We get it. We started off to around Tuesday. We got some moisture scattered across areas of the eastern US, and then we start to get into Wednesday. Most of the country looks quiet, doesn't really favor the Euro AI model, with that system up here being that strong, but, we continue to move forward. And it does eventually show a system. It's just a day or two behind the Euro AI model some snow. Maybe as we are starting to get into next Friday, a week from today, across areas of Minnesota, Minneapolis and Milwaukee, Chicago shows a little fast-moving clipper, and then it does show some energy associated with some cold Arctic air on the Euro. But it's definitely not as crazy as, say, what the Euro AI model is showing. But, this is all the way out into the morning of December. The first shows a weaker system up here. But I really think model guidance is really just trying to resolve the pattern in general. So there's no point in really focusing too crazy much on, winter storm signals or anything like that. But if we do look at the Euro ensemble, we go all the way out to Thursday, Thanksgiving morning here. Not a really big signal for any snow. But then we do extend this all the way through the entirety of the run, which goes all the way out to this goes all the way out to about the 5th of December. You can see how everything begins to fill in more between Thanksgiving and about the 5th of December. And this makes sense to me. It's not a forecast for snow. So if you're hanging out in San Amarillo and think there's going to be 2-3 inches of snow, that's not a guarantee. It's not a forecast, just an ensemble run, and then we look at the eastern US. So we start off once again Thanksgiving morning. Not a real big signal for snow, but then you can see the Great Lakes region-like effects. Snowbelt areas begin to fill in with some cold Arctic air spilling through, and this could make sense if we got cold air going over those Great Lakes. We're going to get some lake effect snows, and then we take it all the way out to about the 5th. On this also, and you can tell everything begins to fill in, but southeast. There's not going to be any early season winter weather chances, and a lot of times, guys, in the south, you don't get a lot of winter weather in December. But as we get into the later half, things could begin to change, and all this fits the pattern very well. You see the blue area, that's a trough of low pressure. This is going to bring cold air down. Sometimes can bring a storm system, but not always guaranteed. But this is lower pressure, and then you see this area right here. This is higher pressure. So of course, this is going to swoop some cold air down. That's not what I'm going to do here. This is going to bring some cold air down. Makes sense. You got blocking up here. This is a lot. This lodges cold air down to this trough. So we're going to have a cold front to follow that's going to bring a chilly air mass as we get into later next week. And so our Thanksgiving period, and then that, goes back up. And what happens after that? Another big trough drops down across the central US. And this makes sense also because if you look right here, we got a big negative EPO blocking up into Alaska that's going to dislodge cold air down into this trough, this area in blue, and we could have a storm system also. But if you notice, we got this nasty ridge setting up across the eastern US. Because remember, I just talked about how trough deep dives, and it causes everything around it to kind of go up. And here it is that goes up. That goes up as this goes down. So literally goes down, other sides go up. Kind of like when you're jumping on a trampoline. Imagine jumping on trampoline in slow motion and how the areas around where you're jumping go up as you go down. So that's kind of like how the pattern works. The upper pattern, the weather works, right? So when you have such a deep diving trough that happens, and as we continue to move forward, all this blue right here could provide a storm system, but it's definitely going to bring down a lot of cold air curls, polar flow setting up, got the blue showing up over here, and we got to get a negative EPO up here in Greenland, so some blocking up here. This will definitely help get rid of this ridge, and right now, this is definitely there's not any blocking up there, but as we start to get to the end of the run, we get several days in December, really a few days to December 3rd. We're still hanging on to some ridging into the southeast, but you can tell this trough begins to slowly, very slowly try to bleed a little bit east. But even at the end, as we get several days in December, we're still hanging on to that southeast ridge. But this is still a pattern. But it looks like, we might have the return of some blocking in Greenland, negative in AO, but we continue to have ridging up into Alaska over areas of the western US. So this will continue to just support a feed of cold air down here. The big question is, where is all this weather heading? And for all of us in the eastern United States and the southeast, can we finally get rid of this warmth? Can this pattern break down so we can tap into that awesome cold air that it looks like the rest of the country is about to get? You know what I'm talking about. So, let's push past that time frame and look even deeper into December. Alright, to do that, all we have to look at are the European weekly models, right? So, picking up right where we left off with the last map I showed you, we once again see this massive pool of frigid blue, that cold air just pouring into the country. It's just dumping all the way down into the lower 48 states. Okay, check this out. We have what's called blocking way up high, and this huge dip in the jet stream, a trough diving way down. It's incredibly broad. I mean, this thing is long. So cold air is just continuously feeding into this setup. But the million-dollar question is, where will the storm track be if a pattern like this locks in for the first several days of December? I mean, you see these X's on the map? Those represent low-pressure systems, and they're probably going to track like this, or maybe like this. This little nudge from the ridge of high pressure is just enough to keep the southeast stuck on the warm side. But as we look further ahead in time, you can see some of that ridging finally starts to back off, and we get more of a ridge building out west instead. This causes that trough, that dip of cold air, to kind of bulge out more over the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, and the Mid-Atlantic regions. Now, we do still have that pesky ridge nudging in right here, so I really think this setup is going to encourage those clipper systems to dive down, and they might even tap into a little bit of that southern moisture and energy. But you know, as we keep pushing forward in time, right around mid-December, which we've been talking about a lot, it looks like we might finally get rid of that stubborn southeast ridge. Yes, this is heading into the middle of the month, let's just call it that. And look, we've got ridging building. We've got this trough trying to set up shop. Now, it's not a super deep trough, but let's be real. This is so far out in the forecast. You can't expect the models to paint a perfect picture. It's going to be a bit smoothed out, if you will. But this is a much better look. We've got some blocking way up here, blocking in the higher latitudes, allowing that cold air feed to just dump right down here. So, you know, things are definitely looking much, much better as we get closer to Christmas time. In fact, that looks a whole lot better. So, the big question is, how does all this translate to the temperatures you and I actually feel at the surface? Well, let's take a look. Now, I'll be the first to say we don't know for sure, but we can look at these maps and try to piece it together. And as we head into that first week of December, from the 1st to the 8th, okay, it looks like we're leaning towards above average temperatures across the deep south. But look at this, most of the country is actually below average, and there is a very sharp temperature contrast, a gradient setting up. It's right in this zone here, and this makes perfect sense based on where that trough is setting up. I really believe we're going to be dealing with a wild temperature battleground to kick off December. And unfortunately, for all my fellow winter weather and cold weather fans across the deep south and southeast, it looks like we are going to start off on the warm side. This map reflects that perfectly. But as we move toward that mid-month time frame, you can start to see some of those above-average temperatures begin to fade away. And then, as we get even closer to Christmas, in that week leading up to the big day, it looks like the eastern United States, as we get into the second half of December, really starts to get invaded by this blue, which signals below-average temperatures. So with that in mind, we have to look at the potential snowfall signal here. Okay, so this first map shows the potential between now and December the 5th for the central United States. This is what it looks like. But watch this. As we extend this forecast out even further to the 21st, you can see how the whole pattern shifts southward. And these areas really begin to fill in with more potential. It's a similar story for the eastern United States. Not a huge signal just yet, except for those classic snow-favored areas in the Northeast. I really think the Northeast could get in on some action. And hey, if you're tuning in from the Northeast and you think I'm always being a party pooper about your winter weather chances, or for you cold weather fans, listen up. You guys are actually in a somewhat favored position in this upcoming pattern. It's not a super favorable pattern for the upper Midwest or the Great Lakes region, but it does favor you guys. There's just going to be a very sharp dividing line, a gradient between the not so favorable and the very favorable zones, and you just happen to be on the right side of it to kick off December. So, the Northeast is looking at some good snow potential depending on your exact location between now and the early part of the month. But the real magic happens as we extend this forecast through the middle of the month and right up into Christmas week. You can see there is a massive change here. I mean, look at this map. And then look at that map. Everything really starts to load up here. Now remember, this is not a forecast, not a guarantee, so please don't view it as gospel. So, at the end of the day, I keep coming back to the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation. We can talk about sudden stratospheric warmings until we're blue in the face, but really, that's going to work hand in hand with the MJO. meaning depending on which phase of the MJO we're in. That's what will determine where the cold air will most likely plunge down from all that blocking we see up in the Arctic region. So, if we take a look at the extended European model here, okay, perfect, we do have an updated run to look at. Alright, and for any newcomers to the channel, let me quickly explain what you're looking at. I'll make this a little bit smaller so it's clearer for you. Let's make sure we've got our colors right. And let's use this one. Okay, so if we look at this chart here, phases 7, 6, 5, 4, and 3. These are for the most part the warm phases for the United States. So think of these as the warm team, but I will tell you, you can still get shots of cold air even in these phases, especially with phase 7, which is what we're about to head into, and definitely in phase 3. But phases 4, 5, and 6 are typically quite warm. In those phases, most of the country is dominated by warm air. Now, on the flip side, when we get into phases 8, 1, and 2, these are our favorable cold and winter weather phases as we head deeper into winter. So, the big question is, where are we now, and where are we heading? Okay, whoops, I keep clicking off of that. We are currently right in this jumbled up mess you see right here. So if you look really closely, you can see the dates 8 and 10, that's November 8th and November the 10th. Okay, that's obviously in the past. We're now at the 21st, and you can see the progression of the MJO is really getting jammed up and tangled right in this area. So, we're stuck in this tangled up mess. But as we move through the next week, you can see that little number 25, that's November the 25th. And then you see 27, which is November the 27th. The model shows us finally starting to break free and get untangled right here. I mean, not literally tangled up, but on this chart, it sure looks like it. And it shows us moving into phase 7. We're in phase 6 right now. So you see 27 and 29, that's still November. But then you see the 1 and the 3 right here, that's the start of December. So, as we get close to Thanksgiving, we start to ride through phase 7. We'll be in phase 7 as we head into the early part of December. Alright, so phase 7 can support cold air down into the lower 48 states. The catch is, it really favors a lot of that ridging in the eastern and especially the southeastern United States, which perfectly backs up what we were just seeing on the model maps. The model guidance is backing this up beautifully. In fact, I'm actually very impressed with how well the models are responding to what's being forecasted by the MJO here on the extended European model. Okay, but here's the good news. It shows us racing through phase 7 a lot faster than how long we've been stuck in phase 6. So, it shows us eventually, by the 5th of December, finally getting into phase 8. And folks, that is the glory phase. That's the one we want in December for fantastic cold and winter weather chances, especially across the central to eastern United States. But then, it shows us getting tangled up again, straddling the border between phase 7 and phase 8 for almost 2 weeks, maybe 10 days or so. We really need it to fully push through. You see how it shows the 19th and 17th finally getting deep into phase 8? What we need is for the progression to move through phase 8 really slowly now. So, while it does show us getting to that favorable phase about a week into December, the question is, does it fully commit and dive in, or does it just kind of hang out on the fence between phase 7 and phase 8? If you're a winter weather and cold weather fan, what you really want to see is a nice, slow ride through phase 8 and then into phase 1 all the way through December and into the early part of January. And there is a chance for that to happen. That's what I've been talking about. There is such a high ceiling, so much potential for late December and early January. So these are the phases we're rooting for, especially phase 8, and it looks like we're heading in that direction. But there's a bit of a complication right here that started to pop up. 2 things have changed over the last week. 1, we're blasting through phase 7 much faster and getting to phase 8. But the new twist we're seeing is things getting a little messy in this area right here. This is a tough one to forecast, folks. Very tough. So, we'll just have to watch how it progresses. And speaking of what this all means, what do these MJO phases actually mean for what we feel when we walk outside? I'm talking temperatures. Let's take a look. What is this? This is the chart for October through December, looking at phase 7. And it supports exactly what the models are showing right here. Okay, you see phase 7? I know the resolution on this is super blurry, my apologies, but it shows a lot of warmer temperatures across the southeast and eastern United States. It also shows a lot of cold across the middle and upper parts of the country, and that backs up exactly what we're seeing on the model guidance. It's incredible! And then we look at this one. Okay, this covers November, December, and January. Since December is that key middle month we're about to head into, I think this is the best one to show. And if we can get into phase 8 in December, It shows widespread cold across the central to eastern United States. So that is the pattern we need to get into to really knock that ridge down, everyone. All right, let's dive into today's weather, starting with a big area of rain cruising across the middle of the country. You can see it right here. I mean, this is some much-needed rain. There's a low-pressure system sitting over the middle of the plains. We've got some snow streaking across the upper portions of the Northeast. We've got moisture down here, and we have this swirling, trapped, low-pressure system down here in Southern California. So that's the national picture right now. As we look closer, there's a lot of dense fog across parts of the country, indicated by the gray counties here. I almost said parishes, but actually, Louisiana is not included in this, so I should not say parish. But we do have some flood watches posted here in central Texas and some alerts across the west. We also have a risk of some feisty weather across areas from Middle Tennessee down to Alabama and Mississippi for this afternoon into this evening, so be aware of that. There is even a 2% risk of a tornado. So, stay weather aware with some of these storms. We'll talk more about that in a second. And the risk of flash flooding? Not a huge one today. Unless you live in the southern areas of California, southwestern Arizona, or the southeast. For you all today, we do have some widespread moisture moving in, bringing that much-needed rain. Some of that rain will move into your area in Kentucky and parts of Tennessee, and we can see these thunderstorms starting to pop. You can even see a little bit of a hook shape in some of these storms in Mississippi. This is all happening as we get into the early part of the afternoon today. And just watch out for these widespread thunderstorms. Jackson, Meridian, Hattiesburg, you'll definitely see some storms in the area. They'll eventually move into Alabama and even the southern areas of Middle Tennessee later on this evening. So just be aware of these thunderstorms today. And once we get up here, some much-needed rain could move east of the Appalachian Mountains and into the Carolinas and Virginia. We could really use some rain there. And we still have these ongoing thunderstorms up here across the Mid-South as we get into later tonight. So when you see this rain, definitely embrace it. Enjoy it, because I know at my house, it has not rained since late October. It has not rained any measurable rain for the entire month of November, and here we are on the 21st. So up here in the Northeast, we've got some snow. Some festive flurries are flying up here in northern Maine. To the south, it's a little bit too warm for any widespread snow, and there's not a lot of moisture to work with anyway. And here comes some moisture moving into southern areas of Pennsylvania and New Jersey as we're waking up tomorrow morning. The Mid-Atlantic, places like that. In the south-central United States, we have moisture swirling down from Canada, impacting southern Nebraska and northern Missouri, and getting into, Illinois. And maybe some additional thunderstorms could develop in eastern Texas later on this afternoon. And most of this energy begins to push outward, but we have a lingering boundary here in southeastern Texas that could continue to fuel some thunderstorms. And downpours in southeast Texas. And then we look at the north-central United States, and we do have some moisture bubbling up, but it's being suppressed a bit and probably will not move very far north. But if you live in the mid-Atlantic, northern Missouri, or areas of central to southern Illinois and Indiana and points south, or Ohio and points south, you can see an area of moisture kind of surging through later tonight. And then there's the west. So, we continue to just have this trapped energy spinning around, which means Southern California will continue to get a feed of moisture in this region, and things like that. It's just literally a trapped low pressure down here embedded in this ridge. Now, temperatures. The southern tier of the country is very warm. There is a gradient of temperature that is going to be a huge storyline over the next 2 weeks. That temperature battle, in my opinion. The Northeast is cold, the South is warm. This is what it looks like across the West, and yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll continue to try to figure all this out together. God bless all of you, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon.